I stared at my father's text message one last time. After your behavior at Christmas, you're not welcome at family dinners anymore. Don't bother coming to Golden Fork on Sundays. We don't want to see you. The irony made me smile. Golden Fork wasn't just their favorite restaurant chain. It was one of my latest acquisitions. The $5 billion deal had closed quietly last month. Another silent addition to my growing empire. The behavior they were so upset about? I dared to suggest that my brother Michael's investment scheme sounded illegal. Turns out I was right. The SEC was already investigating him, not that my family would listen. My phone buzzed with another message, this time from my mother. How dare you accuse your brother of fraud? Until you apologize, you're not part of this family. If they only knew that their precious Golden Fork was just a small part of my $40 billion restaurant and hospitality group. Or that their son's brilliant investment opportunity was on my corporate legal team's radar for months. I checked my watch, a subtle Patek Philippe worth more than their house, and made a decision. It was Sunday, 6 p.m. Time for their weekly family dinner at Golden Fork's flagship location. Sarah, I called to my executive assistant, have the car brought around. The Honda or the Rolls, Ms. Morgan? The Honda. I smiled. Let's keep things interesting. I smoothed down my simple black dress, a custom Chanel piece that cost more than their monthly mortgage, and headed for the elevator. My shabby office, as my sister Kate loved to call it, occupied the top 3 floors of the Morgan Tower downtown. Not that they'd ever visited. 20 minutes later, I pulled into Golden Fork's parking lot, noting my family's cars already there, Dad's leased BMW, Michael's flashy Porsche he couldn't really afford, Kate's suburban SUV. They'd be at their usual table, the one they thought was the best in the house. As I walked in, Thomas, the maitre d', rushed forward. Ms. Morgan, we weren't expecting you tonight. Shoo, I pressed a finger to my lips. I'm here, unofficially. My family's here. Understanding dawned in his eyes. He'd been there when I'd signed the acquisition papers, had watched me personally redesign the entire menu and restaurant concept. They're at table 7, he whispered. Your brother just ordered the wine, the house red. I suppressed a smile. The house red was actually a vintage I'd personally selected, worth hundreds per bottle. Not that they knew that. Give me table 8, I said quietly. The one with the perfect view of their table. Of course, Madam Owner. I settled into my seat, accepting the real wine list, the one reserved for VIPs that included bottles worth thousands. Through the elegant partition, I could hear my family's conversation clearly. Can you believe her nerve? That was Kate, always ready to criticize. Accusing Michael of fraud. As if she knows anything about business. Michael's laugh carried across the restaurant. Pretty rich coming from someone who couldn't even keep a real job. What's she doing now? Some pathetic consulting thing. If they only knew that pathetic consulting thing was Morgan Global Enterprises, currently valued at over $100 billion. The consulting office was just a front for my real operations. At least she's not here to ruin dinner, my mother sniffed. I told the staff we're her family, you know. They seemed impressed. I caught Thomas's eye and nodded. Time to begin the show. He approached their table with his most professional air. Good evening. I understand you're the Morgan family. Yes, my father said proudly. Alexandra Morgan is our daughter. Though we're not speaking to her right now. Ah, Thomas's eyes flickered to where I sat. That's interesting. Shall I bring the owner's special menu? Owner's special? Kate perked up. Well, as her family we should get that, right? Of course, Thomas kept his face carefully neutral. And perhaps Madam would like to select something from our private wine cellar? As Miss Morgan's family. Absolutely. Michael puffed up. Bring us your best bottle. Very good, sir. I'll have Jacques bring the Chateau Lafite Rothschild 1982. Ms. Morgan personally selected it for our collection. I could see their confusion beginning to build. How did their unemployed daughter know enough about wine to select for a major restaurant chain? And shall I inform Chef Marcus that you're here? He always likes to prepare something special for Ms. Morgan's guests. My father's brow furrowed. The head chef knows Alexandra? Oh yes, Thomas replied smoothly. She's quite involved with our operations. Just then, every phone at their table buzzed simultaneously with a breaking news alert. I watched as they reached for their devices, confusion turning to shock as they read the headlines. Breaking news. Morgan Global acquires Golden Fork Restaurant Group in $5 billion deal. Mystery CEO expands empire into dining sector. Wall Street stunned as Alexandra Morgan reveals latest acquisition. The sound of shattering glass cut through the sudden silence. Kate had dropped her water glass, sending crystal shards across the pristine tablecloth. Perfect timing. I stood up, smoothing my dress, and walked slowly toward their table. "Hello, family," I said softly. "I believe you're sitting at my table." The silence at the table was absolute. 5 faces stared up at me in varying stages of shock and disbelief. My mother's perfectly manicured hand clutched her pearl necklace, the one she'd bragged about Dad buying her last year. I'd bought the entire jewelry chain where he'd purchased it 2 months ago. This is some kind of joke," Michael finally managed, his face turning an interesting shade of red. "You can't own Golden Fork. It's worth billions." $5 billion to be exact, I corrected, taking a seat at their table uninvited. "Though that's just the purchase price. The real value after my planned expansions will be considerably more." Kate's husband David, who hadn't said a word yet, was frantically Googling on his phone. Morgan Global Enterprises. Alexandra Morgan. Net worth estimated at. "Those estimates are low," I interrupted softly. "They don't know about the private holdings." Thomas appeared at my elbow. "Madam Owner, shall I bring your usual wine selection?" "Yes, thank you, Thomas. And please let Chef Marcus know I'd like the full tasting menu for the table." I turned to my family. "Unless you'd prefer to keep pretending you've banned me from dinner?" My father's face had gone from red to purple. You bought our favorite restaurant?" "I bought the entire chain. All 500 locations." I adjusted my simple diamond bracelet, a piece that cost more than their combined annual salaries. Along with several other restaurant groups you might recognize. The Capitol Grill, Morton's, Ruth's Chris. But you drive a Honda." Kate sputtered, gesturing toward the parking lot. "That Honda is a one-of-a-kind prototype," I smiled. "Their CEO gave it to me after I acquired controlling interest in their autonomous vehicle division. Would you prefer I arrived in the Rolls? Or perhaps the Bentley?" Thomas returned with a bottle of wine that made my father's eyes bulge. "Your personal reserve, madam. Shall I decant it?" "Please." I watched as my family tried to process what was happening. "By the way, Michael, how's that investment scheme of yours going? The one I knew nothing about?" Michael's swagger suddenly vanished. That's none of your business." "Actually, it is. You see, when you approached Anderson Financial about backing your project." I paused, letting it sink in. "I own them too." "You what?" my mother whispered. "Anderson Financial is a subsidiary of Morgan Global. Has been for about a year now." I took a sip of the perfectly decanted wine. "So when you tried to secure funding for your, let's call it what it is, your Ponzi scheme? Those rejection letters came from my office." The color drained from Michael's face. "You can't prove." "I have every email, every document, every fraudulent proposal you submitted." I pulled out my phone, showing him the folder marked Michael Morgan EC investigation. "Did you really think nobody would notice you were promising 300% returns on non-existent investments?" Kate tried to rally to her brother's defense. "How dare you spy on family? Michael's a brilliant businessman." "Michael's a fraud," I cut in coldly. "And you knew it, didn't you, Kate? That's why you pulled your investment out last month. Right before you convinced Mom and Dad to put their retirement savings in." My parents' faces went pale. "Kate," my mother turned to her. "What is she talking about?" "Oh, they didn't know?" I raised an eyebrow at my sister. "About how you got tipped off that the scheme was collapsing. About how you pulled your money out but encouraged them to invest their life savings." David was still staring at his phone. "This can't be real. Morgan Global owns half the commercial real estate downtown. 3 major hotel chains, tech companies, banks." Speaking of banks, I turned to my father. "How's that mortgage payment going? The one that mysteriously got marked paid last month when you were short." My father's hands began to shake. That was you." "I own the bank, Dad. Have for about 2 years now. Those golf games you play with the bank president? He reports to my board." Just then every phone at the table buzzed again. More breaking news alerts. I watched their faces as they read the headlines. SEC launches investigation into Anderson financial investment scheme. Thousands of investors at risk in massive fraud case. Morgan Global Enterprises cooperating with federal investigation. Michael looked like he might faint. Kate's perfect makeup couldn't hide her growing panic. My parents sat in stunned silence, probably calculating how much of their retirement they'd lost in their son's scheme. "Don't worry," I said, taking another sip of wine. "I've already arranged to protect the small investors. Everyone will get their money back." I paused, looking directly at Michael. "Well, almost everyone." What do you mean?" my mother asked faintly. "The SEC has frozen all accounts associated with the scheme, including yours." I turned to Kate. "And yours too, dear sister. They're particularly interested in how you knew to withdraw your money just before the collapse." Chef Marcus appeared with the first course, caviar I'd personally imported from Russia. "Madam Owner, everything is prepared to your specifications." "Thank you, Marcus. Oh, and please have security on standby. I believe my brother might try to leave before our discussion is finished." Michael, who had indeed been inching his chair back, froze. "Now then," I smiled at my shell-shocked family, "shall we discuss how this is going to play out?" The caviar sat untouched on fine bone china as my family struggled to process their new reality. The restaurant had grown oddly quiet, other diners pretending not to watch the drama unfolding at the owner's table. Michael kept glancing at the exits, but the subtle presence of security personnel at each door made it clear leaving wasn't an option. "Let me explain exactly what's happening," I said, my voice carrying just enough to make several nearby diners lean in slightly. "Michael's investment scheme has defrauded over 3,000 people out of approximately $50 million. The SEC has frozen all associated accounts, including yours, Mom and Dad. But our retirement," my mother whispered, her hand trembling as she reached for her wine glass. "Is gone," I finished. "Along with the college funds for Kate's kids, the down payment for David's new medical practice, and about $8 million from various family friends who trusted Michael's investment expertise." Kate's mascara was starting to run. You knew about this all along?" "Of course I did. Morgan Global's forensic accounting team flagged the suspicious activities months ago." I took another sip of the perfectly aged wine. "Why do you think I tried to warn everyone at Christmas? When you ruined everything with your accusations." My father suddenly found his voice. "That's why we banned you from family dinners." I laughed softly, the sound making several heads turn. "Banned me? From my own restaurant? How exactly did you think that would work?" Thomas appeared with the next course, a truffle risotto that had helped earn our latest Michelin star. "Madam Owner, Mr. Buffett is on the line. Shall I tell him you'll call back?" "Warren Buffett?" David choked on his wine. "Tell him I'll call after dinner," I told Thomas. "Family matters to discuss." My phone buzzed again. Messages from world leaders and top businesspeople about the SEC investigation. Even the president wanted a briefing. The British Prime Minister was worried about UK investors. "You see," I said, reading through the messages, "while you were all laughing at my small consulting business, I was actually building something real. Morgan Global now owns over 300 companies, employs nearly 1 million people, and is worth more than most countries." Michael's face went pale. But you're just what?" I raised an eyebrow. "Your little sister who you said couldn't hold a proper job? The one you all called the family failure? Well, how's that looking now?" Chef Marcus arrived with the next course. Premium Wagyu beef I'd personally chosen from Japan. "Madam," he said, "the governor is waiting in the private dining room. He wants to discuss the state investment fund." "I'll be there soon." I turned back to my family. "Now let's talk about your options." I reached into my Hermes bag, worth more than their cars, and pulled out 5 envelopes. "Each of you has 2 choices," I said. "Option 1. Fully cooperate with the SEC, give back all the stolen money and start over in one of my smaller companies, at entry level." "Entry level?" Kate shouted. "I'm a senior marketing director." "You were," I said calmly. "Your company was bought by Morgan Global last week. Your job no longer exists." Her face crumbled. David started tapping his phone, probably realizing their accounts had been frozen. Option 2, I continued, is to deal with the consequences alone. The SEC is very interested in how you helped hide the fraud. We didn't know anything, my mother cried. Really? I pulled up some emails on my phone. Then what about these messages you sent to investors, saying Michael's plan was making you huge profits? My father's hand trembled as he reached for his envelope. What are you really offering? A chance to earn honest success. Start at the bottom, work your way up. No favors, no special treatment. And if we say no? Michael asked, trying to sound tough, but his voice cracked. I smiled. Then at 9 a.m. tomorrow, Morgan Global's legal team will give everything to the SEC. Every email, every phone call, every shady transaction. Including those hidden offshore accounts. Offshore accounts? Kate turned to Michael. You told me my money was in a domestic fund. Oh, he didn't mention the Cayman Islands? I said. Or that he used your children's social security numbers to open fake accounts? Kate looked shocked. Michael, tell me you didn't. He did, I said. He also used Dad's company, Mom's charity, and a bunch of other family businesses in the scam. All of them are now being investigated. The room went silent. Even the other diners had stopped pretending not to listen. You have until midnight to decide, I said, standing. Choose wisely. Wait, my mother called after me. Why didn't you ever tell us who you really were? I turned and looked at them. I tried. Many times. But you were too busy mocking my career and praising Michael's genius. You didn't see your daughter was building a global empire. And now, my father asked quietly, now you can either humble yourselves and start over, or deal with the fallout. I straightened my Chanel dress. And by the way, you were right. I won't be coming to Sunday dinners anymore. I'll be running my corporation. As I walked toward the private dining room to meet the governor, I heard Kate crying. Michael was frantically trying to unlock his frozen accounts. My parents sat in silence, stunned. Thomas, my assistant, walked beside me. Shall I send their dinner bill to their frozen accounts, Madam Owner? No, I said with a small smile. This one's on me. Call it a goodbye dinner. My private phone buzzed. A message from my CEO. Asian markets open in an hour. Ready to change the world again. I looked back one last time. They all stared at their envelopes, unsure what to do. Always, I replied. Because true power isn't about crushing those who hurt you. It's about giving them a second chance, even if they don't deserve it. And this was just the beginning. The Martinez family Christmas party was always held at my grandparents' mansion in the suburbs of Boston. As I pulled up in my 10-year-old Toyota Camry, I could already see the lineup of luxury vehicles. My cousin's Mercedes, BMWs, and the occasional Porsche gleaming under the winter sun. I adjusted my simple black dress, designer, though they'd never recognize it without obvious logos, and grabbed the stack of gift-wrapped packages from my back seat. The security guard at the gate, who'd known me since childhood, gave me a sympathetic smile. He'd seen how things had changed over the years. Merry Christmas, Miss Sophia, he said warmly. They're all in the main hall. I could hear the party before I saw it. Laughter, clinking glasses, and the unmistakable sound of my family competing to outdo each other with tales of their success. Taking a deep breath, I pushed open the heavy oak doors. Oh my God, is that actually Sophia in that ancient car? My cousin Isabella's voice carried across the hall, dripping with mock concern. Honey, if you needed help with transportation, you could have just asked. I forced a smile, remembering that I owned the company that manufactured the leather seats in her precious Mercedes. The Camry's reliable. It gets me where I need to go. Where's that? The unemployment office? My cousin Marcus chimed in, causing several family members to snicker. He was flush with success from his recent promotion to vice president at Morrison Industries, our family's main business rival. I set my gifts down carefully under the enormous Christmas tree. The packages were wrapped in simple paper, nothing like the elaborate golden wrapping my cousins favored. They had no way of knowing that each contained rare handcrafted items I'd had shipped from artisans around the world. Sophia, darling. My Aunt Carmen swooped in, air-kissing my cheeks. We missed you at the country club's charity gala last month. Though I suppose the ticket price was a bit prohibitive for your situation. The situation she referred to was my supposed failure in life. 10 years ago, I'd walked away from my guaranteed position at Martinez Global, our family's company, to start my own business. They'd all predicted I'd come crawling back within months. I was in Singapore that week, I said simply. What I didn't mention was that I'd been there closing a deal that made my company the majority shareholder in Asia's largest tech manufacturing consortium. Singapore. Isabella's perfectly plucked eyebrows rose. What could you possibly be doing in Singapore? Probably teaching English or something equally humiliating, Marcus Stage whispered to his wife, who giggled behind her champagne glass. I accepted a glass of wine from a passing server, hiding my smile. The server worked for my catering company, one of the many businesses I'd quietly acquired over the years. In fact, this entire party was being catered by my staff, though my family had no idea they were essentially paying me to feed them. Actually, I was meeting with some investors, I said mildly. Investors? Marcus scoffed. In what? Your little consulting business. Please, Sophia. We all know you're barely keeping afloat. It's actually admirable how you refuse to admit failure. If only they knew that my little consulting business was actually Phoenix Global Partners, one of the most powerful investment firms in Asia. The company that was, at this very moment, orchestrating a complicated takeover of Morrison Industries. The very company Marcus was so proud of working for. Speaking of business, Isabella chimed in. Marcus just closed an amazing deal with Morrison Industries. Tell her, Marcus. Marcus puffed up like a peacock. Just a small merger, $400 million. Nothing you'd understand, Sophia. It's high-level corporate strategy. I sipped my wine to hide my expression. The merger he was so proud of was actually a carefully planned step in my company's takeover strategy. Morrison Industries was bleeding money, though they didn't know it yet. Each merger, each acquisition they celebrated was actually bringing them closer to my control. That's impressive, I said sincerely, because it was just not in the way they thought. Now, my father interrupted, joining our circle. Let's not talk business on Christmas. Though Sophia, honey, my offer still stands. There's always a place for you at Martinez Global, even if it's just in middle management. 10 years ago his condescension would have hurt. Now it was almost amusing, considering I own nearly 30% of Martinez Global through various shell companies. Another fact my family remained blissfully unaware of. Thanks, Dad, but I'm doing fine on my own. Fine. My mother appeared, martini in hand. Darling, you live in a rented apartment and drive a car that's older than Isabella's designer handbag collection. That's not fine, that's surviving. I didn't bother correcting her assumption about my living situation. Let them think I rented the penthouse I owned outright. Let them believe I couldn't afford better than my carefully maintained Camry. Their underestimation had been my greatest advantage for years. Oh my God, Isabella suddenly squealed, pointing at my shoes. Are those from last season's collection? Sophia, you should have said something. I have a whole closet of barely worn designer shoes I was going to donate. You're welcome to them. The shoes in question were actually custom-made by an Italian craftsman who only produced 12 pairs per year. The waiting list was 3 years long, but being his company's majority investor had its perks. That's very generous, I said, wondering what Isabella would think if she knew I owned controlling shares in her favorite designer brands. We just want to help, my mother sighed dramatically. It pains us to see you struggling when everyone else is doing so well. Look at Marcus, youngest VP in Morrison Industries history. Marcus preened. It's true. In fact, we're about to announce another major acquisition. Very hush-hush, but it's going to change everything. I checked my watch discreetly. Right about now, my team in Singapore would be finalizing the paperwork that would begin Morrison Industries' downfall. Marcus had no idea that his major acquisition was actually a trap, carefully set and about to snap shut. Speaking of Morrison Industries, my father said, I heard rumors they're having some problems with their Asian market strategy. Nothing serious, but concerning for their long-term stability. Nonsense, Marcus declared confidently. We've never been stronger. This merger I'm working on will cement our position globally. What merger is that? My Aunt Carmen asked eagerly, as Marcus launched into a carefully sanitized version of the deal, leaving out the parts that would expose how desperate Morrison Industries actually was. I felt my phone vibrate in my clutch. The room suddenly went quiet as my ringtone cut through Marcus's boasting. Excuse me, I said, checking the display. I need to take this. Really, Sophia? My mother sighed. On Christmas. I stepped slightly away from the group but made sure to stay within earshot. This is Sophia Martinez, I answered, my voice carrying in the sudden silence. Ms. Martinez. My assistant's crisp voice came through clearly. The Singapore team has confirmed all positions. Should we proceed with the Morrison acquisition as planned? I could see Marcus freeze mid-sentence, his face going pale as the words Morrison acquisition registered. Isabella's champagne glass stopped halfway to her lips. Yes, I said calmly, watching my family's expressions change from condescension to confusion to dawning horror. Tell the team to proceed. And make sure all paperwork is filed before the markets open tomorrow. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the Christmas music playing softly in the background seemed to fade away. Sophia, my father said slowly, what exactly do you do in Singapore? I smiled, reaching into my clutch and pulling out a business card. Simple, elegant, with just 2 words and a phone number. Phoenix Global Partners. Marcus's face went from pale to ashen as recognition set in. Everyone in the corporate world knew Phoenix Global Partners, the mysterious investment firm that had been systematically acquiring companies across Asia. The firm whose CEO had never been publicly named. That's impossible, he whispered. You're just a failed consultant. You can't be. My phone buzzed again with another message. Perfect timing as always. If you'll excuse me, I said pleasantly, I need to take this. Oh, and Marcus? About that merger you're so proud of? We should probably talk about that after the holidays. I have some changes in mind. The next few minutes were chaos. Marcus fumbled with his phone, presumably trying to reach someone at Morrison Industries. Isabella's perfectly made-up face had gone from smug to stunned. My father stood frozen, his champagne forgotten in his hand. Phoenix Global Partners, he whispered, recognition dawning in his eyes. The company that's been buying up tech manufacturers across Asia. The one that just acquired the Singapore Digital Hub. The same, I confirmed, slipping my phone back into my clutch. Though we do more than just tech acquisitions. For instance, we own several luxury automotive component manufacturers. The leather in Isabella's Mercedes? That's one of our subsidiaries. Isabella nearly dropped her champagne glass. But that's a multi-billion-dollar company, my mother stammered. The financial papers call it one of the most influential investment firms in Asia. They do, I agreed, though they've never quite figured out who runs it. Prestigious business magazines keep publishing theories about some mysterious old Asian tycoon. I smiled. Never suspected it might be your struggling daughter, did they? Marcus had gone from pale to slightly green. The Morrison merger. You can't. Can't what, Marcus? Can't stop it? Can't take control of the company you've spent years bragging about. I pulled out a slim folder from my clutch. Maybe we should discuss how Morrison Industries has been hiding its debt through creative accounting. Section 3 of this report is particularly interesting. He slumped into the nearest chair, looking like he might be sick. Sophia, my father stepped forward, his business instincts taking over. Perhaps we should discuss this privately. Family shouldn't negotiate through intermediaries. Family. I raised an eyebrow. Funny how I'm suddenly family now. 10 minutes ago I was just your embarrassing daughter who needed charity shoes. Isabella flinched at the reminder of her condescending offer. Ms. Martinez? A new voice interrupted. James, my head of operations, had appeared at my elbow. Singapore is asking for final confirmation on the Morrison acquisition timeline. Tell them to proceed as planned, I said, watching Marcus's face crumple. But hold off on the press release until tomorrow. It's Christmas after all. My mother finally found her voice. All these years, you let us think. I let you think exactly what you wanted to think, I finished for her. That was a failure. That walking away from Martinez Global was the biggest mistake of my life. That I couldn't succeed without family connections. But why? Isabella asked, genuine confusion in her voice. Why pretend to be poor? I laughed softly. I wasn't pretending to be poor, Isabella. I was living within reasonable means while building something of my own. Not everything has to be about showing off wealth. The Camry, my father started, is a reliable car that gets excellent gas mileage, I cut in. Though I do also own several other vehicles. including, ironically, the company that manufactures custom parts for that Porsche you're so proud of. The Christmas tree lights twinkled merrily, casting colorful shadows across the scene of my family's collective realization. Years of superiority, of casual cruelty disguised as concern, of dismissing my choices, all crumbling in a matter of minutes. What happens now? Marcus asked quietly. With Morrison Industries? I considered him for a moment. That depends. The company has potential, but its current leadership is more concerned with appearances than actual business strategy. Sound familiar? He had the grace to look ashamed. I'm willing to maintain current employment levels through the transition, I continued, though there will be some changes in upper management, starting with a full audit of all executive decisions made in the last 5 years. Marcus went even paler if that was possible. Sophia, my father tried again, his voice taking on the persuasive tone he used for business negotiations. Surely we can come to some family arrangement. Your expertise combined with Martinez Global's resources. Dad, I interrupted gently. Phoenix Global Partners already owns 28% of Martinez Global. The silence that followed was deafening. How? He whispered. Shell companies, careful investments, strategic planning. Everything you taught me, actually. I just applied it differently. My mother sank into a chair, her martini trembling in her hand. All this time I was building something real, I said. Not just acquiring things to show off, not just chasing status symbols, but creating actual value. While you were all bragging about charity galas and country club memberships, I was working with innovative companies, funding educational initiatives, developing sustainable business practices. The Singapore Digital Hub, my father said slowly. That wasn't just an acquisition, was it? The new technical training programs, the community development projects. I nodded. Business isn't just about profit margins, Dad. Sometimes it's about making things better, not just bigger. James appeared again. Ms. Martinez? The Tokyo office is calling about the Education Technology Initiative. Tell them I'll call back in an hour, I said. It's Christmas. Family time. The irony of those words hung in the air. Isabella suddenly laughed, a slightly hysterical sound. All those times we invited you on luxury vacations, offered you hand-me-downs, you probably owned the hotels we were staying in. Not all of them, I smiled. Just the good ones. Slowly the shock began to wear off. My father looked at me with new eyes. Not just recognition of my success, but perhaps understanding of what he'd missed all these years. My mother kept opening her mouth to speak, then closing it again, decades of patronizing attitudes warring with this new reality. The charitable foundation, Marcus said suddenly. The one funding tech education in underprivileged areas. That's you too, isn't it? I nodded. Phoenix Foundation. We're opening 3 new training centers next year. Could? He hesitated. Could I learn more about that? The education initiatives, I mean. It sounds more meaningful than what I've been doing. For the first time that evening, I saw something genuine in my cousin's expression. Not just fear for his job, but actual interest. Come by my office after the holidays, I said. We'll talk. As the evening continued, the dynamics shifted palpably. The boasting stopped. The condescension vanished. Instead, real conversations started emerging. Isabella asked thoughtful questions about sustainable manufacturing. My father wanted to discuss educational technology investments. My mother pulled me aside as I was preparing to leave. I don't understand, she said quietly. If you had all this success, why drive an old car? Why live simply? Why not show everyone what you'd achieved? I looked at her designer dress, her expensive jewelry, all the trappings she'd always thought represented success. Because I wanted to build something that mattered more than appearances. Because true success isn't about showing off. It's about creating value, making a difference. And we never saw it, she whispered. We were so busy looking at the surface we missed everything that mattered. Maybe that's the best Christmas gift I could give you, I said softly. A chance to see things differently. As I drove home in my practical, reliable Camry, I thought about success and appearances, about family and forgiveness. Tomorrow, the business world would be buzzing with news of Phoenix Global Partners' latest acquisition. My family would have to adjust to a new reality where their failing relative was actually a powerful business leader. But tonight had given me hope that maybe, just maybe, they'd learn something more important than my net worth. They'd learned that success doesn't always wear designer labels, that power doesn't need to announce itself, and that sometimes the most impressive achievements are the ones you don't see coming. James texted one final update. Morrison acquisition proceeding smoothly. Board meeting scheduled for December 26th. Merry Christmas, Ms. Martinez. I smiled, thinking of the changes ahead. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about destroying what others have built, but about showing them a better way to build. After all, true power isn't about domination. It's about transformation. And maybe that's what Christmas miracles are really about. Not just changing circumstances, but changing perspectives. Even if it takes a multi-billion-dollar revelation to make it happen.
The boardroom felt colder than usual that morning, though maybe it was just the chill of betrayal seeping into my bones. I sat quietly at the massive oak table, watching my sister Victoria stand at the head of the room, basking in her moment of triumph. As you can see, she said, gesturing to the documents being passed around, Alexandra has graciously decided to step aside, transferring her shares to me for the good of the company. The board can now vote with full confidence on my appointment as CEO. My fingers clenched around my coffee cup as the board members nodded approvingly. None of them questioned the convenient timing, just 2 weeks after our father's death. None of them wondered why I would suddenly give up my birthright, my half of everything our father had built. And none of them noticed that my signature on those transfer documents wasn't quite right. My name is Alexandra Morgan, and at 34, I thought I understood how cruel family could be. But watching my sister steal everything our father had promised me, using forged documents and carefully crafted lies, I realized I'd underestimated her capacity for betrayal. Alex, Victoria's voice cut through my thoughts, honey sweet but laced with venom. Would you like to say a few words? I met her eyes across the table, seeing the challenge there. She thought she had me cornered. After all, what could I say? That she forged my signature? That she'd somehow managed to doctor security footage to show me entering the building late one night to sign away my inheritance? That she'd spent months setting this up, waiting for our father to die so she could take everything? I could say all of that, but I wouldn't. Not yet. Congratulations, Vic, I said instead, raising my coffee cup in a mock toast. I'm sure you'll do great things. Her smile faltered slightly at my calm tone. She'd expected a fight, tears, accusations, anything but this quiet acceptance. What she didn't know was that I'd been watching her too, gathering my own evidence, building my own case. The video footage she doctored. I had the originals, the witnesses she paid off. I had their confessions, the offshore accounts where she'd been siphoning company funds. I had the paper trail. But most importantly, I had something she didn't even know existed, our father's real will. The board meeting concluded with a unanimous vote installing Victoria as CEO of Morgan Industries. As people filed out, offering their congratulations, I stayed seated, methodically stirring my now cold coffee. I have to admit, Victoria said once we were alone, "You're taking this better than I expected." I looked up at her, studying the face that was so similar to mine yet somehow harder, colder. "What did you expect, Vic? A scene? Tears? You know me better than that." She perched on the edge of the table, her designer suit perfectly pressed, her manicure immaculate. "I know you're planning something, Alex. You always were Dad's little strategist. But let me save you some time. It's over. I've won. The documents are ironclad, the board is behind me and you. You're just a former shareholder with no power and no proof of anything." I stood slowly, gathering my things. "You're right about one thing, Vic. I am Dad's daughter. Remember that." Her laugh followed me out of the boardroom, confident and cruel. "Don't be dramatic, Alex. It's just business." But it wasn't just business. This was personal, and it had been from the start. Growing up, Victoria and I had been close, or so I thought. Being only 18 months apart, we'd shared everything. Clothes, secrets, dreams. But somewhere along the way, something had changed. Maybe it was when Dad started grooming me to take over the company, seeing in me the same head for strategy and innovation that had made him successful. Or maybe the rivalry had always been there, simmering beneath the surface of our sister bond, waiting for the right moment to explode. I drove home from the office in a daze, memories flooding back. The way Victoria had started undermining me in subtle ways over the past few years. The accidental leaks of sensitive information to competitors. The whispers to board members about my supposed instability. All leading up to this moment, this carefully orchestrated coup. My phone buzzed with a text from my best friend and head of legal, Sarah Chen. Just heard, you okay? I pulled into my driveway before responding, come over. Bring wine. An hour later, Sarah sat across from me on my back porch, a glass of Merlot in hand. So what's the plan? She asked, knowing me well enough to know I wouldn't just roll over. I pulled out my laptop, opening a folder I'd labeled innocuously as family photos. First, I said, turning the screen toward her, look at this. Her eyes widened as she scrolled through document after document. Bank transfers, emails, security footage, and finally, a video file dated 3 days before my father's death. Is that? I nodded. Dad knew he was dying. He knew Victoria was planning something. So he made arrangements. The video showed my father, thin and pale but clear-eyed, sitting in his study. Alexandra, his voice crackled through the speakers. If you're watching this, then everything I feared has come to pass. Your sister, she's not who we thought she was. I've discovered things. Terrible things. About what she's been doing with company funds. The real will is in the safe at the lake house. The combination is your birthday. Be careful, sweetheart. Victoria has more to lose than you know. Sarah let out a low whistle. Alex, this is huge. We need to go to the authorities. Not yet, I said, closing the laptop. Victoria's not just stealing the company. She's involved in something bigger. Those offshore accounts. They're connected to some very dangerous people. We need to understand exactly what we're dealing with before we make a move. And in the meantime, I took a sip of wine, thinking about Victoria's smug face in the boardroom. In the meantime, I play the grieving sister who lost her inheritance. I let her think she's won, and I watch. Sarah shook her head. She's going to get suspicious if you don't put up any fight at all. Of all fight, I said, a plan already forming, just not in the way she expects. The next few weeks were a masterclass in acting. I made just enough noise about the share transfer to seem legitimate. A strongly worded letter here, a tearful phone call there. Victoria handled each protest with practiced sympathy, always with witnesses present, always playing the role of the reasonable sister dealing with an emotional sibling. Meanwhile, I dug deeper. Every night after leaving the office, where I still technically held a minor executive position, I pieced together Victoria's real operation. The offshore accounts were just the beginning. She'd been using company resources to facilitate something much darker. Money laundering for a network of shell companies tied to organized crime. Our father had discovered it just before his death. His heart attack was starting to look less and less natural. One evening, about a month after Victoria's takeover, I was working late at the office, deliberately keeping my movements obvious. Right on schedule, Marcus, Victoria's head of security, appeared at my door. Ms. Morgan, he said stiffly, it's late. You should head home. I made a show of sighing heavily, shuffling papers on my desk. Just finishing up some reports, Marcus. I'll leave soon. He lingered in the doorway, exactly as I'd expected. Victoria had him watching me, making sure I didn't access anything important. Little did they know that I'd already gotten everything I needed. As I drove home that night, I noticed the black SUV following me, another one of Victoria's precautions. I smiled to myself, thinking of the real will safely hidden in my home's safe, of the evidence backed up on secure servers, of the plan slowly taking shape. Victoria thought she was being careful, but she'd made one crucial mistake. She underestimated just how much our father had taught me. The game was only beginning, and I was playing for keeps. The first sign that my plan was working came 3 months after Victoria's takeover. I was reviewing quarterly reports in my downgraded office when Sarah burst in, her face flushed with excitement. They took the bait, she whispered, closing the door behind her. The SEC just opened a preliminary investigation into those anonymous tips about accounting irregularities. I kept my expression neutral, aware of the cameras Victoria had installed in every office. That's concerning, I said loudly enough to be picked up. I hope it doesn't affect our stock price. Sarah caught on immediately, putting on a worried face. Should we inform the CEO? I'm sure Victoria already knows, I replied, turning back to my paperwork. She has everything under control. The seeds I'd planted were starting to sprout. Those anonymous tips to the SEC had been carefully crafted, just enough to trigger an investigation, but not enough to reveal the full scope of Victoria's crimes. It was the first move in a long game. Later that day, Victoria summoned me to her office, our father's old office, which she'd redecorated in stark modern furniture that would have made him cringe. "Interesting development with the SEC," she said, studying me over her sleek glass desk. "You wouldn't know anything about that, would you?" I met her gaze steadily. "Why would I? I signed away my shares, remember? The company's financial health isn't my concern anymore." "Right," she drawled, leaning back in her chair. "And I'm sure it's just coincidence that these allegations surface right after you lose your inheritance." I shrugged. "Sounds like someone's looking out for the company's best interests. Isn't that what you always say you're doing?" Her eyes narrowed at my tone, but before she could respond, her phone buzzed. The look that crossed her face as she read the message was almost worth everything I'd been through, pure, unfiltered panic. "Get out," she snapped. "And Alex, stay out of things you don't understand." I was halfway to the door when I turned back. "Oh, by the way, how are those offshore accounts doing? The ones in the Cayman Islands? Dad always said diversification was important." The color drained from her face. "What did you say?" "Nothing," I smiled innocently. "Just remembering Dad's business advice. He taught us so much, didn't he?" I left her office knowing I had struck a nerve. Victoria would be checking those accounts immediately, which meant she'd soon discover the discrepancies I'd carefully planted, traces leading to one of her most trusted associates, Marcus. The next few weeks were a carefully orchestrated dance. Victoria grew increasingly paranoid, checking and double-checking her network of fraudulent accounts. She started suspecting her own people, exactly as I'd planned. Marcus was the first to crack. I made sure to be working late one night when he came to my office, closing the door behind him. "We need to talk," he said, his usual confidence replaced by nervous energy. "About your sister." I looked up slowly. "I'm not sure what I could tell you about Victoria that you don't already know. You're her head of security, after all." He glanced at the cameras, then slid a piece of paper across my desk. "Not here. Tomorrow, this address. Come alone." The paper had an address for a coffee shop across town. I pocketed it without comment, but inside, my heart was racing. Everything was falling into place. The next morning, I arrived at the coffee shop early, choosing a seat with a clear view of both entrances. Marcus showed up exactly on time, looking like he hadn't slept. "Your sister," he said without preamble, "is going to get us all killed." I took a sip of my coffee. "What makes you say that?" "Don't play dumb," he hissed. "The money laundering, the connections to the Kovic family, the way your father really died, you know about all of it, don't you?" I set down my cup carefully. "Why don't you tell me your version, Marcus? Start with the night my father died." He broke. For the next hour, Marcus laid out everything. How Victoria had been working with the Kovic crime family for years, using Morgan Industries to clean their money. How her father had discovered the truth and confronted her. How she'd arranged for him to have an accident with his heart medication. "She's cleaning house now," Marcus finished, running a hand through his hair. "People are disappearing. I think I'm next." I pulled out my phone, setting it on the table. "Say that again, Marcus." "All of it. And this time, let's make sure it's recorded properly." His eyes widened as understanding dawned. You planned this?" "Let's just say I've been planning a lot of things," I replied, pressing record. Now from the beginning. By that evening, I had everything I needed. Marcus's confession, combined with the evidence I'd been gathering in our father's video, created an ironclad case. But I wasn't done yet. I waited 3 more days, watching Victoria unravel further as more discrepancies appeared in her accounts. Then I made my move. It was late, most of the office had cleared out, when I walked into her office unannounced. She was on the phone, her voice sharp with barely controlled panic. "I don't care what it takes," she was saying. "Find out who's accessing those accounts and shut them down." "That would be me," I said loudly enough for the person on the other end to hear. Victoria's head snapped up. "I'll call you back," she said into the phone before slamming it down. "What did you say?" I sat down across from her, pulling out a thick folder. "You know, Vic, Dad always said your biggest weakness was your ego. You're so convinced of your own brilliance that you never stop to consider someone might be smarter than you. Her hand inched toward her desk drawer, where she kept her gun. I knew. What are you talking about? The offshore accounts. I've been tracking them for months. The security footage you doctored. I have the originals. Marcus's confession about Dad's death, recorded this morning. I started laying out documents one by one. But most importantly, I have this. I pulled out our father's real will, the one from the lake house safe. That's impossible, she whispered. I destroyed it. You destroyed a copy, I corrected her. Did you really think Dad wouldn't have a backup plan? Did you wonder why I gave in so easily when you took over? She lunged for the drawer, but I was faster. I wouldn't, I said calmly. The FBI is already in the building. So are the SEC investigators and the police. Did you really think I'd come here without backup? As if on cue, we heard commotion in the hallway. Victoria's face crumpled as reality set in. Why? She asked as footsteps approached her office. Why did you wait so long? I stood up, gathering my evidence, because I needed to understand everything. The money laundering, the connections to organized crime, Dad's death, all of it. You taught me that, Vic. Always have all the facts before you make your move. The door burst open as federal agents flooded in. Victoria didn't resist as they read her rights, her eyes never leaving my face as they led her away. The aftermath was chaotic but controlled. Victoria and her conspirators were arrested. The board convened an emergency meeting where I presented the real will and evidence of my sister's crimes. Within days, I was reinstated as CEO. Months later, I sat in my father's office, my office now, looking at the last family photo we'd taken together. Victoria had just been sentenced to 20 years for her role in our father's death and the money laundering operation. Sarah knocked on my door, carrying 2 cups of coffee. Rough day. I took one of the cups, breathing in the familiar aroma, just thinking about how different things could have been if Victoria had just been patient. Dad always planned to give her a significant role in the company. She didn't have to steal it. Some people can't see past their own ambition, Sarah said, sitting down across from me. Your father would be proud of how you handled this. I touched the photo gently. He taught me well. Strategy isn't about making the first move. I quoted, remembering his words. It's about making the right move at the right time. Looking out over the city skyline from my office window, I felt a sense of peace settling over me. Victoria had tried to steal my inheritance, my legacy, even my father's memory. But in the end, justice had prevailed. Not through violence or quick revenge, but through patience, strategy, and the careful application of truth. Dad would definitely have approved of that.